if you've lived in Fort Collins for any length of time at all, you probably are at least aware of Alan's name and maybe a little bit about some of his climbing adventures and accomplishments. But before I introduce him, I'll let you know, next week we have Milt Garrett coming in to speak. And some of you know Milt, but Milt has been working in Russia for over 25 years and involved with a number of Rotary projects in Russia. And he's going to really talk about a lot of interviews that he's done with Russian citizens, sort of without the oversight of the government looking on all the time, and update us on some things that are going on in Russia. So the week after that, we've got Lisa Mesa coming in. She is an extension agent, actually down in the Denver area, and I've been reading her information for quite a while. She's going to talk about how to get your backyard ready to attract a lot of the pollinators that we're hoping we can increase their numbers in coming years. So that's coming up. And kind of an unusual program on the 23rd of March. We have a lady coming in who actually works at the Museum of Natural History and Science in Denver, and she's in character as a lady who lived through the pandemic in 1917, I believe, in Leadville, and about what her life was like living in that pandemic and with the miners and everything that was going on in Leadville during that era. So a wide variety of programs coming up. Our speaker today is Alan Arnett. Alan's a climbing coach, a mountain climber, and a professional speaker, and also an advocate for Alzheimer's health and prevention and research and things that are going on with the Alzheimer's Association. He lives in Fort Collins. He worked for HP for 30 years and took early retirement to actually take care of his mom, who has Alzheimer's. He climbs big peaks as well as small peaks. If you read the information on the website, he's climbed every one of the 14ers in Colorado, but multiple times. And if I've got this right, Alan, you've over 250 climbs on the 14ers, if that's correct. But that's small potatoes to what he's really accomplished with his climbing adventures all over the world. So he's going to expand on those for us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alan.
Great. Thanks, JD. Share the screen here. How about now?
There we go.
Okay, here we go again. So Jim Davis and I were up on Twin Sisters, and I was training for Dalagari, which is one of the 8,000 meter mountains in the world, and he was training for Everest. It was a windy February day, and we knew we went up here on purpose because you go up and you try out your systems, your glove system, changing layers and all of that in bad weather at a low altitude, so that when you're at a high altitude and you hit the same type of conditions, that everything's going to be okay. It's going to how to do it, and it's just muscle memory. Well, we got it right above tree line, and all of a sudden, the wind just really picked up even more than ever. And Jim and I have been climbing long enough together that we almost can read each other's minds. And we stopped, and for about 20 seconds, we discussed the situation and said, this is crazy. Let's turn around and go back down. So Jim stopped and let me go ahead. He was going to take a video. I had no idea he was going to take a video. So I'm walking back along the trail here on Twin Sisters. And, you can see the wind blowing in the trees and blowing my pants. And then all of a sudden, without any notice, bam, I fell down. I fell down the scree field, and I fell down, and all of a sudden I looked up and I saw blood gushing from my nose. It was just absolutely red blood all over the rocks, but that wasn't what got my attention. About that time, Jim came over, and I looked at him. I said, Jim, I think I've broken my leg. It ended up that I had fractured my tibia and my fibula in 3 places.
Ooh.
We can't predict or control how our day goes, but we can choose how we respond. This young lady obviously was very important in my life. This is my mom, Ida Arnett. In the early 2000s, she developed Alzheimer's disease. And as JD said, I took early retirement from a 30-year career with HP to oversee her care, to take care of her. She was in Memphis, Tennessee, and we put her into an assisted living facility there because she had a very, very rich social life, and her church friends were there. She also had 9 brothers and sisters, and most of the relatives lived in Memphis. And of course, I lived here in Fort Collins. So I made frequent trips over the next 9 years and to make sure that she was being taken care of, that she was safe, and most importantly, that she felt loved. But I made a commitment to my mom. I made a commitment that she was not going to become another nameless victim of Alzheimer's disease. So in that spirit, I decided to leverage my climbing and the notoriety that I'd gained through my website to do something that few people actually do, and that is to climb the highest mountain on each one of the 7 continents, the so-called 7 summits, in under 1 year. Now, about, maybe 20 people have done this at this time in 2010 and 11, but most of those were professional guides. They weren't 54-year-old, guys who spent most of their career watching PowerPoint presentations in the basements of hotels around the world. So I decided to set off on this goal, and I wanted to do 3 things. One was to raise awareness, to educate the public, and also to raise money for nonprofit researchers so they could potentially find a cure for it. So I partnered with the Alzheimer's Association, the Cure Alzheimer's Fund out of Boston, and the National Family Caregivers Association. We also worked with Alzheimer's influencers and also nonprofit partners. But most important was a community and the community involvement. By community, I mean the overall global community, not only local, but also on social media. So the real key to the campaign over the year was continuous media coverage, and we got quite a bit of it. I was sponsored by Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer. And so they did a great job of using their PR professionals to help reach all the way from newspapers to magazines to television, and did tons of different interviews all around the world. What I would do, though, on each one of the climbs, so here I am sitting in a snow cave in Antarctica, and I had a satellite phone, and I would write up a blog, and I would post it write up an article and post it on my blog almost every day. I would talk about, what was happening on that particular climb, but most importantly, also very gently touch on the story of Ida Arnett and talk about Alzheimer's and also caregivers, who I call the silent victim of this disease. Also giving shout out to researchers and trying also to raise money on behalf of the nonprofits for research. Well, of course, of all the 7 summits, Mount Everest is the highest in the world. This is a picture. All the pictures you're going to see throughout this presentation are ones that I've taken. This is on the right-hand side. This is coming up from the Nepal side, and on the left-hand side is coming up from the Tibet side, or the Chinese side. When you climb Mount Everest, it's not like climbing a 14er. You just don't go and show up and run up and down and call it a good. You start off with a process of acclimatization. So when you get there after trekking to Everest Base Camp at 17,000 feet, you take a trip up halfway through the Khumbu Icefall, kind of get your ice legs. Next trip up, you go up to Camp 1 around 19,000 feet and spend the night, and you come back down, rest up. Next trip up, you go up to Camp 2 at 21,000 feet. Spend about 3 nights there. This is allowing your body to acclimatize, or to create more red blood cells and create the altered blood chemistry to react to the less availability of oxygen molecules in the air. The third trip up, this is what I call your ticket to the top. You go all the way up to Camp 3 on the Lhotse face at 23,500 feet. We're not using supplemental oxygen at all at this point. And you spend a miserable night at 23,500 feet. I mean, it is just miserable because there's not enough oxygen in the air. You haven't really acclimatized, but you make it. You come back down and wait for the weather window. This is when the winds are under 30 miles an hour for about a week. Head back up to Camp 2, spend a night there, back up to Camp 3. At this point, we start using supplemental oxygen at a relatively low flow, about 1 liter a minute. You head across the Yellow Band and the Geneva Spur, get up to the South Col at 8,000 meters, also called the Death Zone. Head on up to the balcony, change oxygen bottles to the South Summit. And if you're still feeling good and the weather's still good, then you make that last little traverse across and you get a gold star. You stand on the summit for anywhere from, 10 minutes to an hour, back down to the South Col, and eventually all the way back down to base camp. This whole round trip, going there home to home, takes about 6 to 8 weeks. For me, it took about 2 months to be gone from home to do this whole process. You go all the way back down and you trek back out to Kathmandu. So Everest Base Camp is sitting at the base of what's called the Khumbu Icefall. And this is literally just a moving river of ice and snow. It moves about 3 feet a day, about a meter a day. It starts at 17,500 and goes to 19,500. So this is the favorite part of my presentation. There are 7 full-grown human beings in this slide. Anybody see them? There's 7 people in here. I'll zoom in a little bit. Is that better? Can you see them now?
Yeah, I see 4, 5.
Good eye, good eye. There they are. The reason I show you this is really to help you understand the scale of this. I mean, it's just massive. There are towering seracs here that can be 30 feet high. And of course, there's objective dangers hanging off the shoulders of Everest. This is a hanging serac that has fallen since, but this was in 2018 and stopped the entire season for fear that it was going to fall. In 2014, a serac did release, falling onto the ice fall, killing 14 people in this ice fall. So speed is your friend going through the Khumbu ice fall. But there's also another objective danger. These are these crevasses. And the crevasses, there are ladders that are put across them by a team of dedicated Sherpas called the Icefall Doctors. And they come in and they put these in across, they maintain them throughout the entire season. So this was the first time I ever crossed a ladder. I was holding my digital camera and walking across the ladder over this crevasse.
That's cool.
It's cool. What else are you going to say?
Why on earth were you holding a camera at that time?
I don't have a good answer for that. So, the trick here is to keep your eye on the rungs of the ladder, not on the abyss below. Eventually, you get up to the top of the Khumbu Icefall and you enter an area called the Western Khum, CWM. It's a Welsh word for valley. So this is Lhotse, the 4th highest mountain directly in front. This is Everest to our left and then Nuptse to the right. The route goes straight up the Lhotse face here to Camp 3, which is actually not visible. The tents weren't up at this point. And then cross to the left, and that goes across the yellow band of the Geneva Spur. The Lhotse face is just an incredibly physical part of the climb, hard-packed blue ice. You can see the sun glistening off of it. And so you really have to kick your crampons into it in order to get purchase. Once you're up at Camp 3, it's just another one of these out-of-the-world sights. You look back down, that's the Western Khum down there where the clouds are. That's the beginning of the Khumbu Icefall, which drops down. So this is about 23,000 feet. So this is up at the South Col. It's called the Death Zone. It starts at 8,000 meters, or around 26,000 feet. And it's called that because literally your body is dying. You're playing this crazy game of minimizing the amount of time you spend above 8,000 meters, but you still try to get to the summit and back down. Basically at this point, your body doesn't process food at all. We've been going now for about 5 days with probably 2,000 calories a day while we're burning 10,000 calories. So definitely you lose weight. Get up about 10 o'clock at night. You climb on these big mountains at nighttime because that's when the ice and the snow is frozen, and it minimizes, doesn't reduce, but it minimizes the danger of potential having avalanches or rockfall. So this is heading up the southeast ridge right above the South Col at 8,000 meters. And I am in this picture somewhere. It was taken by a friend of mine. He was over on another mountain, Lhotse, the one I showed you earlier. And so I'm coming down from this. But, this is a part of the climb that they just don't put in the brochure. It's incredibly steep on this southeast ridge. You can see people there, the climbers. And I was there around 2 o'clock in the morning. It was about 20 degrees below zero. The wind was gusting at 30 miles an hour. And I was just really just absolutely at my end. Now, what I haven't told you yet is that this is my 4th time to try to climb Everest. I tried it in 2002, 3, and 8. And to be honest, it was my own inadequacies which stopped me all 3 times. But this time I was climbing for a reason. Before, I was pretty much climbing for really selfish reasons to, beat my chest and say, look at me, I'm trying to climb this big mountain. Well, once Ida developed Alzheimer's and she passed away in 2009, I made that vow to her that I would honor her through my climbing and use my website and my 2 to 3 million followers in order to raise awareness and raise money. So as I was standing there about where this pointer is off of the Southeast Ridge slabs, I was really thinking about my purpose. What is my why? Why am I doing this? And it was very clear. I was doing it for Ida, and I was doing it for her 4 sisters who also had died from Alzheimer's disease. So 5 people in my bloodline have died from this disease. That purpose, that sense of purpose gave me more energy than I could ever imagine. So I was able to pick up my pace and keep going, went across to the summit, headed across the Cornice Traverse where it drops off 5,000 feet on both sides, up the Hillary Step. This was pre-earthquake in 2015. Now it's affectionately called the Hillary Slope because it really is no longer this difficult rock climb you have at almost 29,000 feet with crampons and an oxygen mask on and goggles. When I was going up this, it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, actually about 4:30, and pitch black, but I had my headlamp on and eventually made it to the top. So I didn't know this, but this person you see walking, this is a teammate, Kareem, from the Dominican Republic, and his Sherpa was actually videoing him, and he caught me on the summit up here. You're going to see me in just a second, but it was cold. Again, 20 degrees below zero, wind gusting 30 miles an hour. You can see the sun rising over Bhutan and Nepal there. You can see Kareem's Dominican Republic flag gusting in the air. Sun coming up, kissing those cornices. And what you're going to hear in a second is my voice as I'm leaving, in all practical purposes, a voicemail on my website from the summit of Mount Everest.
Hello, this is Al calling from the summit of Mount Everest. It's sunrise here. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's about 5 a.m. We had a very, very fast trip up. Connie was incredible. I feel great. I want to dedicate this summit to my dog and to all the other Alzheimer's. We all love you and miss you. Climb on. This is Alan. Memories are everything.
So I've got to tell you that it was probably more special to me as a climber, given that this was my 4th attempt. But the fact that I was able to raise money and, more importantly, to honor Ida and my 4 aunts, that was incredibly meaningful, and it remains meaningful to this day. And also, I got to take Flat Stanley to the summit. There was a school down in Florida that heard I was going to go up, and they asked me, "Hey, would you take Flat Stanley to the summit?" I'm going, "Sure." And I didn't know who Flat Stanley was. So he lived in my pack for the whole trip up, and we had a good time. So here we are coming back down. This is one of my teammates, Miriam. She was 35 years old from Germany. Her Oma, her grandmother, died from Alzheimer's disease. So we had a shared purpose and a common bond. So here she is, in the Barco Lounger looking like, very, perfectly refreshed. And here I am on life support on the right-hand side. Back in Kathmandu, we went to a restaurant called the Rum Doodle. And if you can prove you summited, and they let you sign the whiteboard there. You can see I lost a little weight. I keep trying to market to Jenny Craig the Everest weight loss program, but so far no takers on it. So you summited Mount Everest at age 54, the 7 summits, raised money for Alzheimer's. What's next? Well, I began to think about it hard, and I began to come up with this idea to climb arguably the world's hardest mountain, K2, to support the battle against arguably the world's hardest disease, Alzheimer's, proving that anything is possible. K2 was never in my dreams growing up on the banks of the Mississippi River at Memphis, Tennessee. This is a mountain that you only dream about. K2 is on the border between Pakistan and China, up in right next to Afghanistan, just a real vacation place that everybody wants to go to. And it's the world's 2nd highest mountain at 28,251 feet. The difference between K2 and Everest is that K2 starts steep, it is steep in the middle, and it ends steep. It has a summit to death ratio of about 20%, 25%, whereas Everest is about 4%. So in other words, 1 out of every 4 people who attempt K2 end up dying. Flew to Pakistan through Islamabad up to Ascoli, a little village there. This gentleman, he and I bonded. I didn't speak a lick of Pakistani. He didn't speak a lick of English, but we really got along well. The next part of the trip is you take an 80-mile hike along the Baltero Glacier from a little village called Ascoli, literally at the end of the road up to K2 base camp. It's been an amazing, amazing journey. These porters carried the gear.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful morning here. This is looking towards Concordia. The big mountain that you see looming right there, that is called G4, Gasherbrum 4. And
It's just an unbelievably beautiful scenery. I thought the Khumbu in Nepal was beautiful, but this in Pakistan is just stunning. Rugged, steep mountains all around, incredibly nice people. Eventually make it to K2 base camp at about 16,500 feet. Here I am in our dining tent, and I made a commitment to try to document this climb in real time. It's never been done before. So I took a lot of videos and pictures and wrote up the blog, and of course, talked about IDA and Alzheimer's, and uploaded all this on a satellite phone. Here's Camp 1. You can see the real estate is really limited here. It goes straight down below the tents and straight up above the tents. This is one of the few flat areas, and this is at 20,000 feet. Again, there's a lot of rock climbing on K2, unlike on Everest. This is a section called House's Chimney. It's about 100-foot off-width crack. That's about 5'4", 5'5" in terms of rating. And here I am coming up that. This is a picture I took from the base camp through a telescope of Camp 2 at 22,000 feet, just to kind of give you a feeling for how steep it is up there. This section above Camp 2 from 22,000 to 24,000 is called the Black Pyramid. Again, really good rock climbing. And I've got to tell you, this was probably the most fun I've ever had in my life of climbing this particular section going up. So we eventually go up to Camp 4. And so we're at 25,000 feet. So just 3,251 feet to go. Here I am doing my best Fonzie pose at high camp at Camp 4. If you look up there at the very top to the right, this is the big issue with K2 amongst many issues, but it has that hanging serac up there. And in 2008, a piece of it calved off and it cut the fixed line and it killed 11 people that season. So again, when you're going underneath that, speed is your friend. We left about midnight, which I said is earlier, pretty normal to do that. Got up to went through what's called the bottleneck. And this is Garrett Madison, our team leader in this case. And then went across, and I started using this hashtag later on because when you get across the traverse here, your crampons you just front point into the mountain and literally your nose is touching the snow. You're clipped into that little fixed line, but it's really a placebo. And I just didn't, if I fell, I knew it would be over. And so, don't fall. So here we are heading up to the very top of it, to the summit. And this is a video that I took from the summit. I'm going to cut it short in the interest of time. And also, you really can't understand what I'm saying. I had actually developed pulmonary edema, which is where you develop fluid in your lungs. So I was pretty trashed at this point. So it was a struggle to get back down to base camp and then do that 80-mile trek back out. But as you can see, this is looking over China and Pakistan, Afghanistan, just absolutely stunning, stunning, stunning scenery up there. So here I am. I summited on my 58th birthday, if you can believe that, July 27th, 2014. Of course, Ida went with me the whole way. I was really, really proud to be the oldest American at 58 to summit K2. And more importantly, though, we raised $70,000 for Alzheimer's. So, we can't predict or control how our day goes, but we can choose how we respond. That day on Twin Sisters was an interesting day. I like to say that more went right that day than went wrong. This happened at 11:53 and on February the 10th, and Jim stayed with me the whole time. He was able to get a cell phone signal and call 911. They in turn called Rocky Mountain National Park, who in turn called Larimer County Search and Rescue and Boulder County Search and Rescue. 5 hours later, laying in the rocks, 5 hours later, 30 people arrived that day. 30 people arrived as the sun was going down. They carried me down to Estes Park. It took them 4 hours to carry me down. I went to the hospital there where they stabilized the fracture. Then I went to the medical center of the Rockies. I had not only broken my leg, but I'd also broken my face, which many people said was an improvement. So this gentleman right here, I have a serious bromance with him. This is Dr. Riley Hale, a board certified orthopedic surgeon. And he's the one that installed Captain Rod, my titanium rod, which is with me to this day. Being the captain, I've had some good times since then. All the pins and the plates and everything have been removed, but the captain is still with me. Went through rehab to start to build the strength back up. As I was going under anesthesia, I looked at Dr. Hale and I said, Dr. Hale, I know I'm 60 years old, but my goal is to climb again, not just to get from the couch to the chair. This is a picture of Jim Davidson in the blue, along with a reporter from Channel 9 that came up to kind of cover the story. This is Diane, my wife. She was my rock through the whole process. Really kind of was there to keep me all together. We went back up to Twin Sisters, the two of us, and went back to the scene of the crime. And you can imagine it was a pretty emotional event. I did keep climbing. I still keep climbing. Went back to Nepal in 2018 to a little mountain called Island Peak, about 20,000 feet. We raised $70,000 for Alzheimer's research there. This is Kami Sherpa. He summited K2 and Everest with me, and I could not have done any of these without him. He is an amazing human being. Of course, Ida was with me on Island Peak as well. Went to Ecuador in 2019, raised some money there as well as in Bolivia. And last year, of course, didn't really go anywhere because of the epidemic. So, the reason I do all of this stuff is really for Ida and for Alzheimer's. I certainly get a lot out of it. I call it purpose and passion. My passion is mountain climbing and my purpose is being an Alzheimer's advocate. And that intersection is unbelievably meaningful to me as I'm approaching my 65th birthday in July. But what I learned from these campaigns is that relationships is absolutely crucial. We were talking earlier about United Way and raising money, but it's the personal interactions that drives loyalty and interest and contributions. We did an integrated campaign of social media, traditional, as well as influential supporters and influencers out there in order to extend the reach and the presence, but also flexibility. Some things worked, some things didn't work. So we had to be really, critical about that and change our methods when it didn't work. Today, about 3 million people visit the website every year from all around the world, tons of social media and still newspapers and television. I got a chance to meet with Congress. Johnson & Johnson arranged that with the Alzheimer's Association, met with 5 different representatives and just really asked them to champion Alzheimer's funding, especially through the National Institutes of Health. When Ida developed Alzheimer's, it was about 500 million. Today, I'm incredibly happy that it's 2.5 billion. That's funded through the National Institutes of Health. Most experts think if once you hit 2 billion, that's about the magic number where we're going to find a cure. Currently, there's no way to prevent Alzheimer's, to reverse it, or to treat it, or to cure it. But I'm very, very hopeful, especially with some breakthroughs that have happened in the last few months, that we're going to see a breakthrough in my lifetime. So with that, I'll wrap up and take some questions with Climb On. This is Alan, and remember, memories are everything.
Alan,
Okay.
thank you. One of our near and dear club members, Dennis Hogarty, passed away from Alzheimer's a couple years ago. And so I know it's something that for our club is near and dear to our hearts, as well as I had a mother who had Alzheimer's as well. So thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for the purpose and passion. I have an incredible fear of heights, but I have always sort of loved and thought even maybe I could just make it to the base camp of Mount Everest at some point, just to see it from up close and personal. So what a great program for sharing with us today.
Well, thank you.
Are there any questions for Alan from anybody?
I have a quick question.
Great.
Edmund Hillary climbed it, I'm guessing, without supplemental oxygen. I'd like to ask Alan how he did that.
He didn't. He and Tenzing Norgay in that 1953 team, they did use supplemental oxygen.
Oh, okay.
There's only 3% of the people that have summited have climbed it without using supplemental oxygen. You have to have great parents, great genetics to be able to do it. I could never have done it. So full
Alan,
stop.
this JD, do you know any information about Mallory? I think they found his remains up there a while back.
They did back in 1999. An expedition went and found his body on the north side. Very quickly, George Mallory and Irvine, Sandy Irvine, they tried to summit it in 1923. They were last seen below the summit when a cloud bank moved in, and they were never seen again. So they were always the question. One of the great mysteries of mountaineering is, did they summit? Were they the first, or was Mallory, or was Hillary and Tenzing the first to summit Mount Everest almost 30 years later? They found his body, but they didn't find any evidence that he had summited, and his partner, Sandy Irvine's body, has never been found. He had a Kodak camera with him. They had a Kodak camera, a little point and shoot, 1920s model. And the dream has always been to find the camera, and the film is still stable to develop it to see what it showed. But the camera's never been found either. It's one of the great stories. I see a question here about the status of research for a cure. As I said, there's literally billions of dollars going in from public-private partnerships. There's a couple of drugs out that have just been about to enter phase 3 clinical trials, which have been very effective in removing the plaque, which is the telltale sign of Alzheimer's for degenerative brain cells, and it's shown to remove that plaque, not in mice, but in humans. So that gives me more faith than ever that we are going to find a cure for this. And it could actually happen in 2021, which I think would be apropos after 2020.
Alan, I have a question for you. Over the years, how many people have actually successfully summited, and how many people have passed away in the attempt?
So there's been 5,500 people who have summited for a total of 10,100 summits. So 5,500 different people have summited, and about 300 people have died.
And follow-up question on that. So you're gone a lot for these type of climbs, and how many years you've been married?
Which time? Now, my family has always been incredibly supportive of it. Way back when, once I didn't start climbing until I was 38. When I did, I fell in love with it. I always tell people, I do this consulting for people who want to start climbing. I tell them, be careful what you wish for, because, it can be an expensive addiction. You either fall in love with it, or you just say, there's no way I'm ever going to, sleep on the ground for 6 weeks at a time. But you're right. When I did the 7 summits, I was gone for around 270 days that year, because I did all the climbs back to back. And these things take time. But my family has always been incredibly supportive of me doing this, and we've made it a priority for the family, self-funding the majority of them. So, you do what you love, and you find a way to make it work.
So, Alan, I used to work for the Credit Union Associations of Colorado and Wyoming, and several times I had the opportunity. We had a speaker, Jeff Evans from Boulder. Are you familiar with
Yep.
Jeff? So
I know Jeff.
He's become a friend, and I follow him as well. So, what a great thing that the two of you do. And so, tell me, do you know your climbing team before you get to Everest, or are you randomly? Or any peak for that matter, or are you randomly placed with people? It
depends. It's really hard. It's really hard to get an alignment of time, desire, and money for everybody to go at the same time. Sometimes you can do it, and I've done that on different climbs. But most of the time, you go on a commercial expedition where somebody else is really doing the logistics. I organized a trip in 2006 to Broad Peak in Pakistan, and I can tell you, I never wanted to do it again. I mean, I would rather spend my energy on trying to raise money for Alzheimer's than going to Costco and buying 500 Mars bars. So how do you
Tell me about that team building process, because it seems to me when you're doing what you're doing, your life is literally in the hands of these other people in that team. And so how does that gel in such a short period of time to accomplish what you all are hoping, your shared goal?
Well, as Ruth would tell you, back at HP, we did a lot of storming, forming, norming, and performing, and the same dynamics happened on these expeditions. You show up in Kathmandu, for example, to go to Everest, or Islamabad to go up to Pakistan, and your first dinner, you're looking around the table and you're looking at everybody, kind of going, "Okay, am I going to trust you? Do I trust you?" And and pretty soon you find the people that you like and the people that you don't like, and my attitude or technique has always been to accentuate the positive and surround myself with positive people, so that that I know I can trust them, they know they can trust me. We develop a rapport, and you just kind of work through it, because there are total ups and downs in a 2-month expedition in some remote area. By definition, everybody gets sick, with GI issues or altitude sickness or something, homesickness, whatever it happens to be. You get that telephone call over the sat phone that you've got this crisis with a kid back home, and you're going, "What am I doing here instead of I should be home, with the family?" So all of that guilt, but having your teammates that you can commiserate with and gather support and provide support, that actually makes the overall expedition much more rich. That camaraderie that you get with your teammates. I remember sitting at base camps, having long talks late into the night with my teammates, perhaps more than a lot of the summits that I've had.
Great. Other questions? No, I mean, it's interesting because having done team building, it's just interesting to me how you can do all of those steps in such a short period of time for such a complex endeavor.
Is absolutely an accelerated environment, and you just don't have time to to let some natural processes take place. And that's the reason that again, you have your strategy and your techniques, and everybody deals with it differently. Some people will be total isolationist and never interact with anybody, and other people will be the class clown. So you've got the bell curve of personalities, and you just learn to appreciate all of them for what contributions they make to the team. I see a question here. What's the general cost for each expedition? Everest can cost anywhere from $30,000 to $130,000. The median price right now in 2021 is around $46,000. But again, it's just like flying on an airplane. You can be in the back or the front and pay different prices depending upon what type of services that you want. Going down to Bolivia or Ecuador is incredibly cost efficient. You can do that for a few $1,000s. Of course, you can climb Long's Peak for free.
Any other questions?
So Bill, thanks. Jean, thanks. Ruth, thanks. Allison, thanks. So for your direct
Alan,
message.
Yeah, Alan, thank you so much. It really was incredibly inspirational, I think, for us today. JD, as always, thank you for bringing us such a great program. Alan, it's our tradition at Foothills to show our appreciation for our speakers. We make a donation to the Book Trust in your name. The Book Trust is, we sponsor a classroom at Putnam Elementary, and enables us to provide books for a lot of children who don't otherwise have books at home to help them with their learning of literacy. So thanks so much. Yeah. Thanks so much. And thank you for all that you do for Alzheimer's. Really appreciate that. And what a great way to combine your passion and purpose.
Thanks, Karen.